Flying in the Face of Fear, an interview with Kim Campbell. In this interview, Kim Campbell talks about her experience as a fighter pilot and combat veteran and how those experiences have helped her to become an effective leader. She also discusses some of the principles that have guided her through difficult times and offers advice for anyone who is looking to overcome their fears and lead effectively. I am so thrilled and honored to have this guest with us today. So, you're about to go on a wellness driven ride. Let me tell you just a little bit about our incredible guest. Kim Campbell is a retired Air Force colonel who served in the Air Force over 24 years as a fighter pilot and senior military leader. She has flown 1,800 hours in the A-10 Warthog, big deal, including more than 100 combat missions protecting troops on the ground in both Iraq and Afghanistan. In 2003, Kim was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross of Heroism after successfully recovering her battle-damaged airplane after an intense close-up air support mission in Baghdad. As a senior military leader, Kim has led hundreds of airmen, both at home and abroad, in deployed locations and enabled them to succeed in their missions. She has experience leading complex organizations and driving cultural change. Kim knows what it takes to be a successful leader, to inspire and empower high-performance teams to achieve success. She is passionate about leadership and feels strongly that leaders earn trust by leading with courage and connecting with their team. Please help me welcome Miss Kim Casey Campbell.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, truly my pleasure. And I just want to say it is with utmost respect. You are an American hero, and I don't say that lightly. We are so honored to have you on the Wellness Driven Life Show.
Thank you. I don't, it's funny you say that. I mean, I don't use that term to describe myself because I feel like so much what I have done is just my job of supporting troops on the ground and helping them get home safely to their families. That's what all A-10 pilots do.
Yes, and it takes that kind of person to be in that position. So, thank you. Let's start out by giving the audience a little bit about who you are. Let's share some background about you.
Yeah. So I just retired from the Air Force about a year and a half ago. I spent 24 years in the Air Force. I started out my career at the Air Force Academy. And I think initially I just wanted to be a fighter pilot. I just wanted to fly. I thought it would be fun. I thought it would be exciting. I had ultimate goals of someday going on to become an astronaut. But over time, I realized how passionate I was about this idea of service. And after flying the A-10, I realized how passionate I was about supporting our troops on the ground. So I stayed a lot longer than I thought I would. 24 years was way more than I ever thought that I would stay in. But I had some incredible opportunities, not just in flying, but also leading teams. One of my favorite assignments was as a group commander responsible for airmen in South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. These are military and civilian personnel. Really a great opportunity to lead and influence. And then my career closed out back at the Air Force Academy, back where I started. And it was a great opportunity to give back a little bit and really try to influence and make a difference in the next generation of leaders. I taught for 2 years there. and then finished out as the director for the Center for Character and Leadership Development. And now I'm happily retired, and just put out a book, which is very exciting, called Flying in the Face of Fear. I do some keynote speaking, executive coaching, and I have two boys who are 10 and 14 who absolutely keep me busy all the time and really focused on what's most important.
So I have, speaking of your book, I do have a photo album, and we'll just go ahead and jump right in. So let's talk a little bit about these photos that we have here. Here is that book that you talked about that you wrote, and what an amazing cover, by the way. I would love for you to talk a little bit about the pictures on this cover. Is
Yeah.
that's the A10, correct?
It is, it's the A10,
Yes.
and I'm laughing a little bit because that picture that's of me is, no kidding, from a disposable camera, because at the time we didn't really digital cameras were, like, just coming out, and so we all brought these disposable cameras that we would then take and get developed once we got home, and that is where that picture of me is from, is someone snapped the picture for me in Iraq, and, it was in my photo album, a little bit grainy, a little bit washed out, and I had to take it downtown Colorado Springs to have it, at least made a higher quality so it could go on the cover of the book, but the picture of the A10, to me is it's a stunning image of,
Yeah.
the A10. It's a picture from Iraq, of an A-10, and I love that the ground troop is still out there working on the airplane, which is pretty standard, where the pilots are done, they walk in for the day, and our ground troops are still getting the work done.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, you're always making sure they are maintained and they're safe. They go through incredible, feats. They're pushed pretty hard, and so I can only imagine that is a stunning photo. So, I'll take this out for now, and we'll go back into the pictures a little later, but let's talk a little bit about, I know you said that you first thought about flying and having this dream of a pilot. It stemmed a little bit deeper when you watched I'm not going to say it right, NASA, a flight, correct? When you were younger.
Yeah,
Tell
so
us
this
about,
yeah,
yeah,
this was back in 1986. This was the launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger, um, and there was something about that launch, something that just, it was exciting, it was exhilarating, and then we watched a tragedy play out as the Challenger exploded on liftoff, and I think, in that moment, I was devastated, and I was 10 years old in 5th grade, and I was devastated. I was It was like I had known the astronauts personally, and I didn't, but I just was so devastated watching it, and talking to my mom, who was there with me, who is an oncology nurse, and we were talking through it, and she said, Kim, sometimes there are things in life that are worth risking your life for. And I realized that these astronauts died doing something that they believed in, something that they were willing to give their lives for, something that was bigger and more important than themselves. And, over the course of some days, talking to my parents, I was like, I want to do that. I want to be an astronaut. And my dad, he was an Air Force Academy grad as well. And he said, if you want to be an astronaut, a lot of them are pilots. And one of the best ways to become a pilot is to go to the Air Force Academy. But this was 5th grade. I don't know that my dad actually thought that I would stay committed to it. I think having his little girl go off to the Air Force Academy was a little tougher than he realized. And I'm not sure he knew that I was going to stick with it, but I did. I mean, I just set this goal, and it was like a switch flipped for me. Like I was so committed to now this path, this mission, this goal of mine, that I worked really hard to achieve it.
yeah, absolutely, and it is rare. I mean, your parents, I'm sure, did not think that you would follow through with that, but I think that experience absolutely is where your servitude stemmed from. That's where it started, and because in your mom saying to you, sometimes you do things that are worth dying for. I mean,
Yeah.
that's such an incredible, powerful statement. And I would think it's very fair to say the people who do go in the line of fire and in danger and put their life on the line, That's exactly what it is. You just feel like you're doing your job, and that the why is bigger than yourself. The
Yeah.
reason is bigger, the servitude of it, the protecting of others, because there's more involved than just you.
Yeah. And that's so true. I mean, I think, there's this commitment to service and there's commitment to the mission, but there's also commitment to my brothers and sisters that I served with, and the camaraderie that we feel, the sense of commitment to each other that, we're willing to die for each other. We work together, we push each other, we make sure that we are going to excel in those environments, and we push each other to achieve that high level of performance. But when it comes down to it, it's so nice to know that those other pilots out there, the ground troops, you name it. There's so many people out there that I knew always had my back.
It certainly makes a difference. I would say, when you feel like you have somebody right there with you that you've trained with, that has your back,
Yeah.
that will be there right alongside you, and they're doing the same thing as you. Especially when I would say when you're facing death, and there is the unknowing of what's going to happen. It's like, this is what we're all here doing.
Yeah, I think having been in a scenario where I wasn't sure I was going to survive, having a wingman, having somebody by my side that I knew was there and who had the bigger picture, who had the situational awareness that I didn't, that was not gonna leave me. He was gonna be my wingman. He was gonna follow this through all the way to the end. I think knowing that and having that in my life at that time was really important and really critical, because it showed me how important it was to have a wingman by your side when you go through difficulties in life. And I really have carried that forward to the rest of my life, of just having a team, having people that will support you, that will encourage you, that will have your back, but also challenge you and push you and know when you're not performing at your best. I think it's so critical that we find that sense of belonging, that sense of camaraderie, that sense of mutual support.
So that's a really big statement there. You're talking about community. You're talking about surrounding yourself with people who, like you said, they not only have your back all the way through, but they're going to tell you and they're going to push you when you need to be. They're going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
They're going to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not just about and I think about this in leadership too, in terms of, you want the people on your team that are going to support you and encourage you, but you also want the people on your team that are going to walk in and be able to shut the door and have that honest conversation and hold you accountable and tell you when things maybe aren't going as well as expected. So I think that idea of having a wingman, having somebody that provides that support network. I mean, I look at my husband in my personal life, and the struggles that we have gone through as a couple, both being active duty military, and he was my wingman, right? We've had this partnership going through it together, and the ups and downs, and the fact that I could rely on him was huge. I mean, he understood what I was going through. He was there to provide support. He was there to have my back, but he was also there to let me know, maybe if there wasn't something that was maybe connecting in the right way with either my team, my kids. I think it extends beyond just our professional life, and it extends into our personal life as well.
Absolutely. It absolutely does. That's why I wanted to really highlight on it a little bit more, because you know, again, surrounding yourself around the right people that are going to be there for you and support you and be so honest with you. Do you have any examples of a time when you had an experience with that person that's very close to you, was brutally honest with you, and you had to take it as a learning experience?
Yeah, I've had a few of those opportunities. I think back really very early in my career, as well, and this was in my initial pilot training days, and I'm still learning to fly, but we're also being evaluated, and we fly missions where we get graded, and how we do really impacts our overall performance. And this was my final ride in the program. I'd done fairly well up to this point, And on this ride, it was a formation ride, meaning we fly tight formation next to each other. There's certain features on the airplane that we're looking at to stay in that really tight position. And on the ride, my visor on my helmet started fogging up, probably because I was nervous and breathing so hard. But my visor started fogging up, and it got to the point where like I couldn't see very well, and I got nervous and wasn't flying very well. And finally, I was just like, okay, I need to tell my instructor, my evaluator in the back seat. And he's like very calm. He's like, no big deal. He's like, I got the airplane. He moves away, tells me to clean the visor, and then I do the best I can, and then to move back in. And I moved back in, and instead of thinking about what I was doing right in the moment, I was thinking about how poorly I had flown in the past, couple minutes or several minutes. And I was really kind of beating myself up and not focusing on what I was doing. And I just continued to make errors. It was like this snowball effect of just these errors that kept getting worse. It turned out it was like the worst ride I had ever flown, the worst I had performed. And, it was my fault. I just let it get out of control. In the debrief, I remember the instructor, and he just looked me right in the eyes and he was like, Kim, you are a good pilot, but that was a terrible ride and you have to learn to let it go. He said, you
Mm.
are going to make mistakes. You have to learn to let it go. You cannot be thinking about the past 30 seconds. You need to be thinking about the next 30 seconds. Kind of hard to hear. I knew I hadn't performed well. It's still hard when somebody is like, that was terrible. But I honestly am so thankful it happened so early in my career, so early in my flying experience, because that lesson has stayed with me throughout my career, not just as a pilot, but also as a person, as a leader, as a parent, because we do make mistakes. And sometimes we just beat ourselves up and we continue to do it over and over again. And the truth is, we need to learn from them and then we don't do it again. But then we move on.
That is such a powerful lesson, and I don't even need to repeat you. Like, you have just explained everything so beautifully, and how that affects us so greatly, and how people, when they are faced with life and death situations, or they're in training and they're being scored and graded, and every little second and every second thought matters, and it makes a big difference, and how easy it is for us, just on a human level, like with your experience, to slip back into the past and slip into those negative thinkings and worry, and how that greatly affects you know the next second in front of us, and what's right in front of us. And so, I agree with you. I have been faced with a few lessons that were awful, but I learned them and I never did it again, because you learn it and you get it. And what a great lesson. I agree with you, how fortunate you were to have learned that early on. I think that's a lesson that so many people struggle with for most of their lives. That's one of the hardest
Yeah.
lessons, is to let things go.
And I still have to remind myself, right? Like I can still feel myself occasionally. I'll like beat myself up. And even my husband will occasionally be like, let it go, a little reminder. Because we are hard on ourselves and we're kind of our own worst critics sometimes. And the truth is, we just need to let it go. I mean, learn from it, learn the lessons, figure out what you're going to do differently the next time, but then let it go. And it's not an easy thing to do. And, when I think about advice, when I think about what I would tell my younger self, I almost wish I would have even earlier, right? In middle school and high school, I see it with my kids now of, they're worried about doing something. They're afraid of going to do something because they're worried that they're going to mess up or they're going to
Mhm.
fail. And it's just this constant reminder of like, hey, yes, you might, but we're going to learn from it. We're going to do it differently the next time, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that very human side of yourself. I think that, even I was doing it before the show. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in your presence, like American war hero. And, it's so easy to put people on a pedestal. And, but none of us get away from being human and really experiencing the same issues, the same thought patterns that we all have to strive to be better about, and to remind ourselves that's constant. So thank you again for sharing that. We're going to move into our first commercial, and when we get back, we'll talk a little bit about any adversities you may have faced early on in your career when we come back. Hi, I'm April Hove, the Managing Director of the Fort Worth, Texas chapter of eWomen Network. I'm so excited that you stopped to watch this video. I've got good news for you. You have just discovered an international network of women entrepreneurs who are committed to helping you achieve, succeed, and prosper. We are on a mission to help 1 million women entrepreneurs each achieve $1 million in annual revenue. Here at eWomen Network, we have a complete success system that supports you every step of the way in building and growing your business. You being here right now is no accident. We're supposed to know about you. We want to meet you to find out how we can help you, as well as learn about what you have to offer. With over 500,000 women connecting through 118 chapters across the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK, you are never alone. If this is resonating with you, please go to eWomenNetwork.com/Fort Worth. Notice too my contact information. I invite you to reach out to me and check out our upcoming in-person and online events. I am really looking forward to introducing you to our community. So welcome back. And when we start talking about your early career going into to the military, and your dad, you said he was like, oh, I don't know if I want my daughter, doing something like that. And all of the thoughts that, people think and what you face as a woman going into a male dominant field. What was that like for you early on? And how did you alleviate some of that?
Well, thanks to my dad. Once he realized that I was actually committed to going to the Air Force Academy, he really opened me up to his world of he wanted to make sure that I was ready. He wanted to make sure that I was prepared. So much so that we ran the hills in San Jose, California in our combat boots together. He installed a pull-up bar in the bathroom so I could do pull-ups every time I went in or out of the bathroom. I mean, he was just very committed to making sure that I was physically prepared to go to the Air Force Academy. And I think that's what I realized as I showed up to the academy, and I could really I never fell out of a run. I could stay engaged in all of the athletic activities. I mean, that was a huge thing because I proved that I was credible and capable. But I learned that that was the key piece, was that yes, I may have been in this male dominated environment, but really the guys just cared that I was credible and capable. I took that with me, that mindset with me going into my first fighter squadron on day one, when I knew I was going to be the only female fighter pilot and I knew I was going to be judged. I think at the time there were roughly maybe 35 female fighter pilots in the Air Force at the time out of about 3,500. So it was definitely a very male dominated environment. But I walked in there knowing that I needed to prove myself, that I wanted to prove myself credible and capable in the airplane. So I worked really hard. I tried to maintain a good attitude through it all. And what I realized was that the guys in my squadron really didn't care about the difference. They just cared that I was credible in the airplane. And I was able to prove myself, prove that I was credible and capable. And that made all the difference for me. These guys were my brothers. We had a lot of fun together. They had my back. They always watched out for me. But credibility, more than anything, was absolutely critical in those environments.
Do you feel like you had to push yourself a little bit harder in order to gain that credibility?
Well, yes. I mean, I will tell you that I walked in there also with it was almost like a weight on my shoulders. I felt like if I made a mistake or if I failed, that I would ruin it for the women that followed me. And nobody else said that to me. That was what the pressure that I put on myself. So, I mean, and I've realized, it just go in and be credible. Everybody's going to be judged when they're new in an organization, but I put that pressure on myself, good or bad. I mean, it made me put in the work, that's for sure. So whether or not that was an expectation from everyone else, I put that pressure on myself, like I was representing all of the women that would follow me. And there is some truth to that in terms of some of the early women that went through, and we were being judged. People were wondering how we would perform, and
Yeah.
it turns out we could fly just like everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many areas that you have to prove yourself in, right? When you're in that position. It's not just your flight skills, but it's your ground skills. It's when you fall to the ground, the ground fight, when you're at that point, that's the worst point you could be at. So can you survive? Can you survive long enough to have his back, right?
Yeah.
So you're just it's like this constant proving yourself that you can do it and giving that credibility. And yes, you have me and I have you. So that's amazing. And I want to jump a little bit into, because you're talking about your fears and your thoughts of, if I fail, this is a failure for not just me, but for the women who follow me. And how profound of a feeling and thought that must have been and is. And what I want to talk about what has happened now, because you have now been put into a Smithsonian museum.
It's crazy.
It is, but this is your fears
Yeah.
then, like, and what is happening now in such a historical standpoint, and what you have led the way in so many aspects for women.
I think, I've it's been 20 years, and so I've had a lot of time to reflect on this, but I think I realized throughout my life there were many times where I felt fear, whether it was going to the Air Force Academy and walking up the Bring Me Men ramp, which is what it was called back then, or walking into my fighter squadron on day one, knowing that I was going to be the only female fighter pilot, whether I was leading a team and commanding a squadron or a group and hundreds to thousands of people, um, to just being a mom when my husband deployed to Afghanistan for a year. Like all of those moments, I felt fear. I felt nervous or worry about how I would perform because I wanted to do well. I wanted to set the example. And I think what I've realized looking back is that fear, that feeling is totally normal and it is okay. It is all about what you do next. Can you be afraid and do it anyway? Can you
Mm.
be brave and afraid at the same time? And I think that's really what stands out to me is that, we all face fear in our lives. We're going to face challenges. We face things that make us feel stressed and worried. It is all about what we do in those moments. And for me, there were many moments like that. I did feel fear, but I was able to take that next step. And I really feel like that is what's most important. That is what matters. And, you know, eventually it made an impact on the next generation of leaders, the next generation of women. And I'm totally honored and humbled to be in the Smithsonian, with so many of my heroes, really, people that I looked up to, people that I read about and heard about, the Wright brothers, Jackie Cochran, Chuck Yeager, you name it. I mean, it's very humbling to know that my things, a piece of my airplane, my flight gear is going to be, well, it is in the Smithsonian. It's mind blowing.
It is. It is so cool. And I know you talked about it hasn't really settled in yet. It's like very
No.
surreal. But Kim, you did it. And how cool is that? It's really just this loud shout out of, you can do anything. And like you said, can I be brave and fearful all at the same time? Well, yeah, because anybody who does anything that's worth it is experiencing that, both of the feelings at the same time. So and you just do it because you feel like it's your job and you have that bigger why and reason for doing it.
Yeah, I feel like life has come a bit like full circle in the past couple months. I mean, it's been 20 years since I flew a life-changing combat mission over Iraq. And, now to publish a book, to finish my career where I started, it feels like everything is really come together and showed me that, back in those early days, all those struggles, all those hard things, the mistakes, the failures, the doubts, like, it was all worth it. It all, those moments, as hard as they were, I think they made me a better person. They certainly made me a better pilot, but I just feel like when we do those hard things, like, we become stronger for it. And I didn't recognize it at the moment, right? It's painful, it's frustrating, but now, kind of 20 years come full circle, I can look back and I know that all those hard things made me better along the way. And they helped me overcome challenges. They helped me face uncertainty. And they really helped me get to the point where I am today.
Yeah. Well, we'll move into another commercial, but when we get back, let's talk a little bit about that. What was that experience that you had when the plane went down? How did you react? So we'll talk a little bit about that when we get back. Stay tuned.
Hello, everyone. I am Kim Jacobs, the host of The Kim Jacobs Show, and you all know who's right here with me, Dr. Les Brown. How are you, Dr. Brown?
I'm blessed and highly favored. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time you want to give yourself a competitive edge. If you got a message, you have some knowledge or experience, a story, or if you want to do something adventurous and exciting with your life that can increase your credibility, expose you to millions of people, I'm encouraging you to have your own talk show. I used to have a talk show. That one talk show catapulted me to another level. Now there are more people watching the internet, as you are aware, than television.
Yes.
Come on, somebody.
That's right.
Dr. Kim Jacobs, she trained people on how to have their own talk show. She will train you how to do that. And now with me partnering with her, now you have the combination of an audience, expansive audience. We have over 4 million people in all of our platforms, and the coaching you need to grow your business, to grow your multi-level marketing organization, to draw more attention to yourself in this noisy economy. Go ahead, Kim.
So in the training that I do, Les, I actually do a 6-week training. It's 1 hour per week. And each week I meet with the individuals one-on-one. We go through and we talk about all of the things that's necessary for a show to become a reality. We go from how to actually identify your focus area, what's going to be your ideal customer that's going to be tuning in. We'll talk about how to get guests, how to get sponsorship, how to go about getting your lighting, your branding, and your banners, and everything that you need to know. And guess what, Les? They own their own content at the end of the day.
And that's exciting. Now, if you're ready to create a shift in your business and in your life and increase your cash flow, I want you to go to KimJacobsConsulting.com. It's right there on the screen, KimJacobsConsulting.com. People say opportunity knocks on every door. Right. No. Opportunity stands by silently waiting for you to recognize it. So I want you to recognize that this is a time for you. This is an incredible time to have your own talk show. It establishes a level of credibility.
Yes.
And by being exposed to people on a regular basis, it allows you to strategically begin to impact and attract your audience. She can take you in a place in yourself that you can't go by yourself. So go to KimJacobsConsulting.com. That's KimJacobsConsulting.com. Did I say KimJacobsConsulting.com? Yes, you did. Very good. Make sure you go there and sign up for the coaching, and we're looking forward to working with you. You have something special. You have greatness within you. That's my story, and that's Kim's story, and we're sticking to it. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Kim Jacobs is an incredible coach. I highly recommend her. And so I want to move into, I have a couple of comments that came through, so I'll bring a few of them in. Manley said, no pressure. When's the movie deal? Move over Top Gun, real life story. So that's fun.
That's
Maybe what's
exciting.
next? Maybe what's next, right? And then I have another comment that came in from Diana. She said, "Thank you for your service. My young daughter, she's 18. She's in a male dominated school presently. What advice can you give her?"
Yeah, I think this goes back to a little bit of what I was talking about before, but my advice, and this is not just for young women, but men as well. If you're going into an environment, whether you're a minority or you know it's going to be challenging, then you need to work hard. You need to be credible. You need to put in the work, put in the effort. And I think also, try and maintain a good attitude, but also, find people around you, that network, the people that will support you, the people that will have your back, the people that will be on your side. And that to me helped me get through some of those tough times, to know that there were other women going through similar things. There weren't many of us, but finding that the bond with to be able to talk about some things, to be able to have that
Mm.
kind of open environment where we could really just honestly share some of our struggles and frustrations, because at some point there's got to be a place to vent and let go and be true to who you are. And I really think that for me was a huge piece of this, was having that support network. But be credible, work hard, maintain a good attitude is really what it comes down to.
Oh, that's really, really good feedback. And yeah, I mean, the fact that we surround ourselves with people that we can relate to. I was just at a meeting yesterday with a police chief, and he talked about the importance of, his team, the officers, needing people to talk to because they see so much and they deal with so much. And when their spouses, their partners, or their friends can understand, and they can, be able to release some of the pressures of the things that they're interacting with, is so vital. And I would also maybe notate on that is, and let me ask you, Kim, what your thoughts are on this, but if you don't always have someone, physically with you, would you say that leaders or friendships that you can turn to is maybe, authors, people in books, people who inspire you?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I look throughout my career, and yes, sometimes there people were on the same team that I was that really close with. Sometimes it was not even people that I knew, but now with social media, there are Facebook groups out there, that kind of share some of those tough questions that you maybe don't need, you don't know who to ask for. So I think there's a lot of ways to get help, but I do think it takes courage to go find that help. I think,
Mm.
I'm seeing more and more with this younger generation, they are more than willing to go ask and find mentors, to reach out to people that they either know or don't know. And I think that's fantastic, because that wasn't really the environment that I grew up in. I don't feel like I really had a really strong mentor during my time. I had people that I trusted and that supported me, but it really wasn't that true mentor-mentee relationship. So I think there's a lot of ways to find that, whether it's a group of
Mm.
people that are in your organization, whether it's reaching out on social media, whether it's reading a book that somehow relates to what you're going through. I think all of those things, it just gives you a different perspective, because sometimes
Mm.
when we are that minority, we're kind of stuck in our own little environment, and to be able to reach out and talk to people who maybe can give you a different idea or a different perspective, or say, I've been there, I've done it, and it's hard, but here's how I got through it. I think that's so important.
Yeah. So Diana said, "What a great role model you are. Thank you. She's on the right path. I can't wait to share this with her." So I wanted to give you that feedback.
I
Also,
love it.
speaking of mentors, Hillary asked, "Did you have mentors? If so, how did you find them?"
Yeah, and like I was saying initially, I mean, I don't know that was there certainly weren't many women doing what I was doing, and so I didn't feel like I had a mentor from that perspective. But I I realized that there were people in my life who supported me, who reached out to me, and it was just where I found a common connection, a common bond, something that I could relate to. And I think sometimes it's as easy or as hard as just reaching out and ask somebody, will you be my mentor? For me, I had definitely people that I looked up to, that I could talk about things with. But when I look back, I wish I had taken more of an active role in trying to find a true mentor. I think they can be so valuable. It's so important to have somebody to talk to have those conversations, to be kind of a, you know, we talk in the words champions now that can champion you in an organization. So there's, there's mentors, there's coach, there's all these different people that can play a role in your lives. And I think it is a little bit about having the courage to go find them and ask those questions.
Mm. Yeah. And so thank you for sharing that. You're very open about that, where you say you wish that, I seeked out more mentors during my time. And I feel like maybe in a sense you kind of have to become your own when you don't have anyone. It's like, okay, I'm just going to keep pushing myself and keep, trying to figure this out, and sometimes learning the hard way. And speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about your experience, that big life-changing experience that you had.
Yeah, it's hard to believe for me that it's been 20 years, because so many ways it feels like yesterday, because I remember it all so well. And
Mm.
I mean, I think it's because it was such a life-changing moment for me. Um, this was back in 2003 as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. And we were supporting ground troops, as we always do. But as we moved closer and closer to Baghdad, it just got more intense. And this was April 7th, 2003. And we were supporting our ground troops, as we always do. We would fly from Kuwait, fly all the way to Baghdad, which was about an hour for us. We would air refuel, and then we would just wait for a tasking. And they would just flow aircraft in based on the needs of our ground forces. And we got a call that troops were taking fire. They needed immediate assistance. And unfortunately, the weather wasn't great, so we weren't really sure how we were going to get in there to help them out, but we knew we had to do everything we could. And we proceeded to the target area, got over the target area, and dropped down below the weather. And I just remember, as soon as I got below the weather, I could see this firefight. There were bright flashes and smoke and tracers going back and forth across the river. It was really surreal for, a couple seconds there, because I feel like it was everything that we had trained for, everything that we planned for is this moment. And we decided we were going to get in really quickly, try to put some firepower down on the enemy location, and then kind of reassess things. As we're talking about this, I'm also seeing these puffs of gray and white smoke and flashes in the air pretty close to my cockpit. And it's, I realize they're shooting at us too. And yet we have a mission to do. We got to get in there. So we make our couple passes, and pulling off target from my last pass is just when I felt and heard a loud explosion at the back of the airplane. I knew immediately I was hit. There was no doubt in my mind. The jet nosed over, pointed down at Baghdad below. And I just remember the ground getting closer. I instinctively just pulled back on the control stick, and nothing happened. And I remember looking down at the ejection handles, just thinking, like, this is the last thing I want to do, is eject potentially into the hands of the enemy. And I knew I had to make every second count. I set aside my fear, and I just focused on taking action. I analyzed the situation, kind of trying to figure out what's going on. And I realized that the hydraulics on my airplane had dumped out pretty much instantly. And at this point, it's either eject or get the airplane in a backup emergency system. And thankfully, flipped the switch, and the airplane started to climb up and away from Baghdad. And that was really the first moment I thought I might actually survive.
Wow. Absolutely entrancing. Glad I can come back to you, because I'm just like in awe listening to your story. Very, very powerful. And I've heard about your story a little bit, and it's the same thing like you touched on. What can you do in those moments? Like, you don't want to eject. That's like the last thing you want to do. It's an option, right? You have many options that you're faced with at that moment. And again, thank God for all of the training, right? Because that's where we fall to. We don't rise to the level of our courage. We fall to the level of our training. And so, but ejecting would have meant you're going into the enemy's playground, right? You're subject to them on so many levels, and who knows what could be. You also, not only do you want to give them yourself, but you don't want to give them the US property, and what can they do with that? So
Yeah.
all of the things and all of the choices that you could have done in that moment. And there is a big reason why you earned that Distinguished Flying Cross, because of the choice that you made in that moment.
Yeah, and, getting out of that, in that moment when everything was going wrong, I mean, I really did rely on my training, my preparation, everything that had really led up to that moment to be able to make a very time critical decision and have the courage to take action, like to overcome my fear and to be able to take action. And then I still had to get out of Baghdad. I mean, my airplane was now flying, but I still had an hour trip back to our home base, and I still at this point didn't know if I was going to fly it back and just get it to friendly territory and eject, or fly it back and attempt to land. It felt like a really tough decision, is an understatement. I felt like I could potentially make the wrong choice. And I really spent the hour flying home thinking about it, weighing the pros and cons, thinking through the consequences, talking it through with my wingman. And I felt confident, nervous, but confident that I could land the airplane. And so getting that airplane on the ground was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, but also a really defining moment for me, showing me that what I was capable of doing, even in the face of fear, right? That I could
Yeah.
step up and take action and get it done.
I can only imagine that time, that hour long, like you're flying this injured plane, and you have this hour, and it's almost like the more time, the worse it is, right? Because you have this time to reflect, and you're still in this time zone of the what ifs. Can I land this plane successfully? Like, there's a lot of things that could happen if I don't land it successfully. And what that must have felt like for you in that moment. I'm curious, when was the moment that you actually had a moment of peace, where you were able to calm down, to, lower the heart rate a little bit? Was it during that hour-long time, maybe a few times within that? Or was it when you finally hit the ground and landed safely?
I think once I got out of Baghdad initially and kind of above the weather, my heart rate slowed, my breathing slowed. I finally kind of almost a sense of calm of like, okay, I'm outside of Baghdad. If I have to eject, now my chances of survival and rescue are going to be much better. I don't know that I fully was able to decompress. Well, I don't know, not even after I landed, but getting back on the ground was definitely a huge feeling of relief. I mean, it was, I had survived. I can't even, yeah, that was a huge sense of relief, but I think there was still such an adrenaline high of getting out of the airplane, seeing the damage, the number of people that were out there waiting to meet me. I don't know that I really came down from that until that later that night, when it kind of all hit me of like,
Mm,
what did I just go through?
yeah.
And, thankfully someone had shared with me the idea of journaling while I was deployed. And
Mm,
that was my way of, at the end of the day, I would write in my journal and kind of decompress and just put it all on paper. And, the fears, the frustrations, just put it all on the paper. And then it was kind of like, okay, I can close that and move to the next day. So I don't know. I still compartmentalized a lot of it and didn't really deal with it at the time. I think there was just, there was still war going on. I still needed to be able to fly. And so I think finally coming home, reconnecting with my husband and having kind of some of those hard conversations of like, I could have died. Like,
yeah.
what are our priorities in life? Where do we want to focus our priorities? And it just, in
Ah,
many ways, of like just having that tough conversation of realizing that, you don't really know when life is going to end. And are you living it intentionally in the way
mhm.
that you want and the way that you think you should? And what are your priorities? So obviously a really tough situation, but one that I don't know if thankful for is the right word, but I guess I'm grateful that I got the experience to be able to think through some of those things very early in my life, very early in my career.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I'm kind of like, whoo, over that story. It really gives me not shaky, but like I just feel like goosebumps sort of ish with the story. And I really appreciate that. I could feel it in such a way, really understanding that when you do go through those life and death experiences and the reflection on how do we want to live our life and really live it fully, and how easy it is to go back and feel like, did I do enough? And, again, that's really great that you had that lesson of, let's not think about the past and what are we going to do for our future and forward moving. And what an incredible gift you had too, like you said, to be journaling and working through that, because that's a traumatizing experience. It would be for anyone, man, woman, age, it doesn't matter. That's a traumatizing experience, period. And, knowing how to work through that, and journaling is such a powerful way to be able to let that out. And again, going back to the community aspect of how you say, that's really important to have. I had a comment come through. Diana asked, how do you keep yourself healthy emotionally and mentally after that experience? Does it still affect you today?
I think at the time, good or bad, I tucked it away to not really deal with it at the time, because I had to be able to get back in the airplane. And so I would say that I didn't fully deal with it until I got home. And then I recognized that I couldn't keep it tucked away for a long time. And which was, again, very thankful to have a husband who was an A-10 pilot at the same time I was, and he knew exactly what I had gone through. He understood kind of the severity of the situation. So I think having him and being able to talk to him was huge. And I just relied on the camaraderie of my team. Like when I landed, when my airplane hit the ground, I mean, we broke all radio discipline. And well, I don't think I said anything other than to myself, but over the radio, I could hear all the guys from my squadron just like, good job, welcome home, so glad you're back. Like all these things that were just coming over the radio. And so knowing again that I had support network, again, these were my brothers, that they were just so happy that I was on the ground. So having that sense of camaraderie, I think really helped me deal with it. And then I really focused on the missions and flying, and like I said, didn't really deal with it till I got home. I do still think about it today. I think about it. I guess I think about the positive lessons, but every time I tell the story, I can see it, I can feel it, like I can hear it. It all just kind of comes flooding back. And I will tell you, I've been listening to my book on Audible recently, and it's not me narrating, it is a professional narrator. And she does such an excellent job that I'm listening to my story. I know the outcome and my heart is still racing. Like I can feel it all over again. And so it still comes up today, but I really think about it in a more positive way in terms of all the lessons that I learned and how thankful that I am that I survived. But yeah, it's still very fresh in my mind for sure, even after 20 years.
Yeah. And how brave of you to be out and sharing the story, through the written word and through through here on these platforms, and in your speaking engagements and in your teaching, teaching the youth. I mean, your post-military career is, the one that you have now is almost just as profound with the things that you are doing and all of the teaching and what you're giving.
Well, I realize how important stories and experiences are. And, when people were willing to share their stories with me, their lessons learned, their mistakes, their failures, I learned so much from them. And I will tell you that day over Baghdad, one of the things that was on my mind was one of the stories that someone had shared with me. It was a former A-10 pilot, and, he talked about getting hit with battle damage. He talked about, this is during Operation Desert Storm, and kind of what they went through and how they survived. I had also read a book about warthogs and Desert Storm, and the stories of the pilots that they shared of flying in manual reversion, this backup system that I was in, and how they did it, and the things that went well, and sadly the things that didn't. But I remembered those stories.
Yeah.
And it's just a reminder to me, yes, it's an opportunity to share, but I also feel like I have a bit of a responsibility to share these lessons learned. I think I don't want anybody to ever have to go through what I went through. I don't think, not many people are going to fly a, fighter jet over Baghdad, but the lessons that came out of it in terms of followership and leadership and teamwork and empowerment, those lessons are applicable across the
Yeah.
spectrum. And so it's so important to share the stories. I know they had an impact on my life. And so that's my hope with the book. That's my hope with the keynote speaking, is that I can make a difference and an impact for others.
Absolutely. I love that you say that. The stories are so, so impactful. It's how we relate to one another. It's how we give each other, support and courage. And so I want to go through a couple of the pictures. Now, this photo is the one that that you said was taken with this really cheap camera. You had to get it, done at a place in Colorado Springs. And but this is you when you're very young, and it is such a cool photograph.
It's such a great memory. I mean, the smile on my face. I mean, I was really passionate about what we were doing, and I believed in the mission. I believed in my team. And so it's nice to have the memories. If I have one regret, is that I don't have more pictures like this, that I don't have the number of pictures that kind of capture all of those memories.
Mm, I can relate with you, Kim. I have one photograph of me when I was in law enforcement. One. Why? Why one? I mean, even I could have had photos for graduation and for, all of the things. And I understand you very well when, why didn't we have more photos of when we were experiencing this time in our lives? So I'm so glad that you did have this one and that it's featured right on your book cover. It's a really cool photo. Now we're going into the fun parts.
Yeah.
This is what we do it for.
Yeah, so this picture is actually, at my change of command ceremony when I was getting ready to take command of a unit. And, for those familiar, it's a very formal ceremony. It's, big crowd up on the stage. This is actually on a stage. There's an A-10 behind me. And, normally, your family sits in the front row, but my son, who was 3 years old at the time, who chose what he would wear to the ceremony. That is not what I chose for him. But he decided that he was going to come up on stage and sit with me. And I have to say, this moment right here, like, it was a turning point for me, because I think I had this view of leadership going in. This was one of my first roles, about 150 military and civilian personnel. And it was like I thought that I needed to be perfect, right? That I had the answers, that I was this tough, combat proven fighter pilot. I was going to lead the unit. And then, like, I realized by my son coming up on my lap, because I mean, I was nervous about what my team was thinking. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm supposed to lead 150 people and I can't control my 3-year-old son, I
Right.
was nervous, but I realized in that moment, like, this is the human side of leadership, right? I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a fighter pilot, I'm a leader, I'm all of these things. And it took my 3-year-old son to teach me that.
Oh, and I really love this photo because you just look like such a proud, pleased, happy mother. And you're right. It's the human side, and that is so important. I mean, how else are we supposed to we can't just be robotic,
No,
That's not how it is.
I know, and this one moment really connected me with my team in a way that I had no idea would. I mean, after the ceremony and the next days as I walked around and talked to people, the thing they talked about most, not my speech, but my son getting up on my lap.
Yes. And this is the famous photo.
This picture is, from my final flight in the airplane, which thankfully there was a photographer out there to take some pictures, or I probably wouldn't have these either. But, yeah, this was, taxiing in for my final flight, and, what you can't see is all the people waiting for me, including family and friends, ready to hose me down, because that's what we do on your last flight in the airplane. But this was my final flight in the A-10, which was a little sad in some ways.
Bittersweet.
Yeah,
Bittersweet.
bittersweet. Yeah, exactly. And that flag you see there was with me on every single mission that I ever flew.
Oh, that's so cool. So cool. And tell me about this photo.
So this is actually, there are a few pictures, right? And this one I was like, I need to take a picture in front of my airplane because it has my name on it. This was probably 10 years into my career, and this is the first picture that I actually took in front of an airplane with my name on it. I don't know why, but this is at Nellis Air Force Base. I was there as part of our test and evaluation squadron, but I finally took a picture with an airplane. A little bit hard to see in this picture, but it's got my name on it. And I'm again thankful that I took the opportunity to go do this. That was such a great assignment, an opportunity to upgrade the A-10 and take it to its new latest and greatest technology, but just a really, really fun assignment as well.
Oh, that's very, very cool that you've been fortunate enough to dive into so many aspects of your career. I guess that's the benefit of being in something for so long, where you get to explore and experience and do so many different aspects.
And this is the family at our retirement ceremony. So my husband actually retired a year before I did, but it was in the middle of COVID, and he didn't have a ceremony. So we decided that when I retired, we would do a joint ceremony. And those are my two boys. Uh, and they're wearing the child medal that we gave them just as a tribute to their service. And, they put up with a lot with us both being active duty, both being
Mm.
pilots, both being commanders. So this was a pretty proud day that, at the end of the day, when everything is said and done, I'm just glad that my family is by my side.
Are your boys wanting to, dive into the same career field as mom and dad?
I'm not so sure. The older one is figuring it out. He's a freshman in high school, figuring out what he wants to do. My younger one wants to go to West Point and join the special forces. So we'll see.
Okay.
As a
Okay.
mom, it's really hard, but
Yeah.
I now know what I put my own parents through. And now I'm just trying to support my kids doing what they love.
It's funny how that happens, isn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to share this real quick. We're getting closer to our time, but a good service friend of ours. I don't know if you can see that.
I can see it.
So this is called a challenge coin, and I'm sure you're very well aware of it. But this is actually from Colorado Springs, and my husband carries it with him. But I was wondering if you had anything you wanted to share about those.
Yeah, well, challenge coins are kind of fun because, most units have them. As a commander, I had them. They were something special that I would give out. And I would show you. It's probably too hard to move the camera a little bit. I don't know. Let's see. I'll see if I can. No, I don't think I can do it. I might have to go too far. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
It's a good thing I cleaned up a little, but those are all challenge coins that I have from throughout my career. And it's just a special reminder sometimes of the things that you've done, the places that you've been, the achievements that you've had. But it's a great way to recognize people as well. And that was probably the thing that I loved being a commander, was being able to recognize people from my team for the work that they did.
Yes, yes. Thank you for sharing that. We know that they can be kind of a big deal, and sometimes if you're not military, you don't know what they are. So I wanted to share that little bit in piece. I'll bring in one more comment. Hillary said, "Are your boys proud of being military kids?"
I think they are. I think it was kind of all they knew growing up. And I guess I'm grateful that they had some really incredible experiences and got to do some really cool things growing up. But I'm also thankful now that I am retired and I can keep my kids in one place. They were ready to be in one place, and they made that very clear to us.
Yeah.
But I think they are proud of being military kids. I think they've got some pretty incredible stories to share.
Yeah, and what, the resilience that, you're able to create as a family, and because your husband and you have been through so many challenging experiences, the life lessons that you get to pass on to the boys, I think that there's a lot being said for that. And so, speaking of transitions, I just want to highlight just for a moment one of our sponsors. And this is Hillary Hill's Empowering Transitions Life Coaching. And she really specializes with people that are in military and transitioning out of it. So the veterans who are looking for their what's next. So you can contact Hillary at empoweringtransitionslc.com. Again, that's Hillary at empoweringtransitionslc.com. So I just wanted to highlight that while we're on the topic. And I want to thank you, Kim, so much from the bottom of my heart for being on the Wellness Driven Life Show, and make sure that our audience knows how to contact you. Your website is www.kim-kc-campbell.com. And oh my gosh, if you have time, can you please tell us what KC stands for?
Well, I know everyone thinks it's my initials, but we don't choose our own call sign. We get assigned a call sign, and my call sign is Killer Chick, which is what KC actually stands for.
And how did you earn that title?
It's given to you. So usually it happens on a Friday night. It's a completion showing that you're completed and ready to go to combat. And they tell stories about you. You're not in the room when they tell the stories. You walk back in the room, and I remember walking back into cheers of like, they were super excited, and that told me that my call sign was now Killer Chick.
That's awesome. I had to point that out, so www.kim-kc-killer-chick-campbell, that's CAMPBELL.com. And that's also going to be in the description. If you are watching the replay, which many of you will be, you can always find the information of our guests and information about the show. And speaking of the Wellness Driven Life Show, thank you so much. It wouldn't be possible without your generous contributions. You can donate in many ways: Cash App, PayPal. When you donate on the website at www.thewellnessdrivenlifeshow.com, you will be left with a follow-up email that you can keep for your records. So thank you again, Kim. It's been, again, an honor and a pleasure. You're welcome back on the show anytime. Come back in 3 months. I know there's going to be a lot more stories to share, because with the launch of your book, there's going to be a lot of things happening for you, a lot more stages, a lot more teaching and, engaging. And, the fact that you're now in the Smithsonian, so there's so much more for you. And it's just a beautiful thing. Thank you for shining your light and for sharing it with the world.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. My pleasure. And we will see you next time. Goodbye for now.